Hello students, welcome to the answer writing program. Today we will be discussing 3 questions, 2 static and 1 current affair, and those 2 static questions will be from GS to governance portion, that is development processes and development industry and role of civil services in our democracy. So let's see the overview of all the 3 questions. The first question is, we have to write about the benefits and the drawbacks of the lateral entry into civil services. The second question is about the NGOs and the dependence of these NGOs on the international donors, their impacts. And the last one is related to the extreme weather events and the impact of climate change on these extreme weather events. And the next part is measures to enhance the preparedness. So these are the 3 questions. We'll deal all the 3 questions one by one in a deeper manner. So let's start with the first question. Discuss the potential benefits and potential drawbacks of lateral entry into civil services in India. The keyword is discuss. So we have to write about the benefits and the drawbacks in detail related to the lateral entry of civil services in India. So we will follow the same approach: introduction, body and conclusion. Introduction, we can start with the definition based, current affair, data based, fact, any personality speeches, whatever feels you that it suits the best in any particular question, you can use that type of introduction. Next come the body part. Body part in 10 marker question mostly consists of the 2 parts. So we will write the headings followed by the subheadings and the arguments and examples wherever possible. Then finally in conclusion, either we can do summary, we can write some suitable case study, or we can write some suitable measures to enhance the effectiveness. It's according to the question, what the question is demanding. So we will follow this structure. Let's see this introduction. Because the question is asking about the benefits and the drawbacks of lateral entry. So we will deal these parts in the body. So before getting deeper into what are the benefits and drawbacks, we can simply define what are the lateral services, what are the lateral entry. So in definition, it's suitable in this particular question that we can start our introduction with the definition of lateral entry. So what is the lateral entry? When the private individuals are allowed into the civil services. What type of private individuals? Who have the expertise or the experience in the particular field. They get into the civil services at the mid and the top level positions, instead of getting through the bottom through the traditional recruitment process, as we can see in the case of the UPSC examination. So lateral entrant or the lateral entry means that they get directly into the middle and the top level position, like director and the joint secretary. Second thing is, you can link with the recent data. Like in the 2019 and 2021, government has opened the vacancies for the lateral entrants. So you can write about that this number of the vacancies has opened up in 2019 or 2021, 22, whatever the case may be. So you can write that recent data in the introduction. Let's come to the body part. The body part will have the 2 things. First is benefit and the second one is drawbacks of the lateral entry. So we will write 4 to 5 points in each of the case, because this is the explicit demand of the question. So what are the benefits of lateral entry? The first and the foremost is, with the allowance of lateral entry, it helps in achieving the twin objective. Twin objective of first, increasing the availability of the manpower in the civil services. Because according to DOPT, there is a shortage of approximately 1500 IAS officers in the civil services. So first objective is increasing availability of the officers or the civil servants. And the second is, it will help in gaining the fresh talent from the society. With the new wisdom they will come, with the new perspective. They have the specialized skills. So we will get the fresh perspective or the fresh mindset in our civil services. So these are the twin objective and the first benefit of the allowing of lateral entry into the civil services. The second part is specialized skills and expertise. Our civil servants, when they get through this bottom-up approach, usually from the examination, like as we can see in the case of the UPSC, through this written, then interview. So when they get into the services, they are generalistic in nature. They are not specialized in any particular field. So with time only, they get the experience like in later of their career stage. But this is not the case with the lateral entrants. Lateral entrants come with the specialized skill set, with the specialized knowledge. They have some experience and expertise in their domain. So when they come into the civil services, they can rejuvenate the system of this civil services. They come with a new perspective. They come with a specialized skill set, so they can use that skill set into the problem solving techniques of the civil services or in the administration. They have the different strategic approach for the problem resolution or the conflict resolution. They are experts in their domain. So the government can reap the benefit from this entries. But this is not the case with our civil servants who they are in the civil services right now. They are generalists. But the lateral entrants will be the specialists. So they'll come up with the new rejuvenated ideas, new innovation skills. Like in the case of, see, in this type of questions, we can put as many examples as we can. Whatever we see in the governance aspect, in the newspaper, whatever we see, good case studies, good approaches towards the administration or the decision making, we can put it here. Like what we have done here is, we have taken the case of Vajiram Iyer. He was a civil servant. Later, he took voluntary retirement from the civil services and he went to the World Bank for the water resources management. But then Indian government asked him to lead the Swachh Bharat mission. And we all know that the Swachh Bharat mission is a success because of his unconventional and non-bureaucratic way of doing things has increased the efficiency and the delivery of the processes. So we can put these examples like Swachh Bharat mission led by Vajiram Iyer. He was a lateral entrant. So with his new perspective, with his specialized skills, expertise, he performed exceptionally well in the civil services. Next comes the bringing a change in the work culture. Our bureaucratic culture is often criticized. Our bureaucratic culture is often criticized as status quoist. Those who do not want to reform, whatever the things are, they want to remain the same. The next is rule-based bureaucracy. And the next is they are not in favor of innovations, pro-innovations or red tapeism. But when these lateral servants or the lateral entrants will come into the services, they can rejuvenate the whole ecosystem of the civil services. They can change the approaches of doing work, of doing that operations. They can go against this bureaucratic culture of red tapeism. So they can rejuvenate or revive the whole culture with the new perspective. Then the next benefit of the lateral entry is diverse representation. Now, the lateral entrants can be from NGOs, other than the government officials, then private entities, then academia, and various other entities can get into the civil services. So, the diverse representation can be there in the civil services, which is not the case now. Next is participatory governance. Now the governance will be done by the private as well as the public sector with the lateral entrance when allowed in the civil services. So these are the benefits of the lateral entry. So next we'll see about the drawbacks of the lateral entry. The first one is it goes against the idea of the merit-based recruitment, because the lateral entry can be of any domain, of any background, which is expert in the any particular field. But who will measure or the qualitatively and quantitatively? Government. So this can be exploited to put the politically affiliated or the loyalist or the favorite people in the government. So this goes against the idea of the merit-based recruitment. Next comes the lobbying. Private entities or the organizations can put their nominee in the government for the policy interventions. Nominee will be the lateral entrant. Next comes crony capitalism. The personality or the person or the individual who have the high connections or the networks with the big business houses or the political affiliations, when this gets into the civil services or the top-notch positions, they can exploit the public resources for the private gain, for the benefits of the big businesses. So this can be promoted. And one of the top most fear of promoting the lateral services is that this can promote the crony capitalism. Next is, this can be the platform for the private individuals who will get into the civil services. They can exploit the public resources or the most critical information which is not open for the public. It is for the government officials also only and the government institutions or the government agencies. But now the private partners are getting into the civil services, so now they also have access to that critical information. So maybe they can leak that information. This is also the one aspect. Then next is lack of institutional loyalty. We have civil services ethos, values, very high institutional loyalty aspects. But when these civil servants or the lateral entrants will come from the private background, they will not have that much high standard institutional ethos, because they only work for the profit margins in the private sector. So maybe there will be the clash when they get into these civil services. The next drawback or the fear is that they will also merge into the bureaucratic structure. Because what we are talking about, we are saying that when these people will come with the specialized skill set, knowledge, new innovative techniques, new experience, wisdom, but what will happen when they will only merge with the red tapeism, when they will only merge with the bureaucratic structure and lethargy? So this is also one of the fear. So these are the drawbacks of lateral entry. So because now we have written the positives and the negatives of the lateral entry, what we can write in conclusion? Like we can write that yes, there are some issues with the lateral entry, but we cannot see every lateral entrant with the eye of fear. We can take the example of Manmohan Singh or the Montague Singh Ahluwalia, or as we have seen the case of Parmeswaran Iyer. They have done exceptionally well in their field. Like Manmohan Singh was an economist. Indian government appointed him as chief economic advisor and then finance secretary or the finance minister later. So he did that LPG reforms with PV Narasimha Rao, obviously. So he did exceptionally well. He took that reforms which was the need of hour at that particular time. And these were the very highest of the highest reforms after that independence. So this is also the case of lateral entry. Then Montague Singh Ahluwalia, Planning Commission, Deputy Chairman. Then Parmeswaran Iyer, and many more. We can quote examples. This Aadhaar, UIDAI, Saurabh Garg. He is also lateral entrant. So, second ARC has also recommended that civil services reforms should be there, and the lateral entry permission or the admission of lateral entrants is one of the solution in the civil services reform. But we have to be more cautious about the recruitment and the training. We have to give them meticulous training so that there will be no conflict of interest for them, for the regulations of those lateral entrants. So this way we can write something on the balanced note, that the positives and the negatives and what can be the measures to put them into the services, because we want their specialized skills, as well as we have to see that it upholds the integrity and the effectiveness of the ecosystem of the civil services. Okay, so this was the first question. So let's see the model answer. Model answer starts with the lateral entry definition and the vacancies, then benefits, specialized skills, bringing a change in work culture, faster decision making, bridging the gap between the private sector, their demand, and the government sector. Next come the participatory governance. Then we see the drawbacks of the lateral entry. These are the lateral entries drawbacks. We have almost seen more than this only. Then in the final we have written the second ARC recommendation about that the specialization, bureaucratic inefficiencies and the resistance to change. These are some challenges in the Indian bureaucracy, and we have to remove them, or we have to take care of this by getting the lateral entrants, and stressed on the importance of selected and training lateral entrants meticulously to ensure their understanding of the civil services functioning and enable their effectiveness. So this was the first answer. Now comes to the second question. The second question is saying that the increasing dependence of NGOs on international donors has negatively affected them. Examine means the dependency of the NGOs on the international donations or the international donors has affected them in a negative way. And the keyword or the directive word is examine. Examine means we have to investigate this statement deeply. Using the facts, data, arguments and examples. And in the end, because this is the examine, so we can investigate that to this extent this is true, but it has some positive thing also. So in the end, what we can do is we can write that although these are some drawbacks or these are many drawbacks, but still foreign funding is required for their functioning or to expand its operations. So you can write at the end this thing. Okay, so let's start with the introduction. In introduction, you can quote some recent data or the example so that you can set the context, that in this context my flow will be there in this answer. Like you can tell about some FCRA or some regulations of FCRA and some case study in which it has found that some NGO has taken international donation and this is merging or involving in some illicit activities. So this can be the case because it is substantiating that it is negatively affected them, because now the government will put more surveillance. Then next you can write something about that this much foreign funding has come up in last 10 years or 5 years, whatever the case may be, to these many NGOs, because it will substantiate that yes, NGOs are taking the foreign funding. So this will set the context in the given answer then. So let's move to the body part. In body, the first part is we have to write about the negative impacts of increasing dependence on international donors or the funding. Any NGO, when it establishes itself, it establishes with some vision, with some mission, with some goal, objectives, and the community participation is also there, because it is a group of people to solve some issues, local issues. But when the international donations or the international funds come in, obviously that international donor will dominate the working of that NGO, and it will lost the vision or the mission of that NGO, and the whole autonomy or the control of that organization, of that NGO, will be in the hands of the international donor. So the first negatives or the drawback of foreign funding or the foreign dependence is loss of autonomy and control. The next one is government stringent regulations. When any NGO is registered that it is taking some foreign funding, so it comes in the eye or in the view of the government, and the government puts stricter regulation, because government has also fear that these NGOs are involved in some can be involved in some illicit activities which are against the national interest, or like some illicit activities like money laundering. So government has also to put the stringent regulations. So these stringent regulation suffers or impacts the autonomy and the control of those NGOs. Then next comes the survival. When the NGO is heavily relied on the international donations or the international fundings, and when this suddenly stops, it uproots the whole survival of the NGO. So this is the major issue, because now the NGO is not self-sufficient. Its working is not sustainable. The local resource mobilization is very less, and the government, and the NGO is heavily relied on the foreign funding. So this is also the issue of survival. So these are the issues on the NGOs as an institution. These are the negatives impacts of increasing dependence on the NGOs as an institution. Next comes how the international dependence impacts the working of NGOs. First one is, now the NGOs priorities will shift. Now they will divert their focus from the local issues to whatever the international donors are saying, because if they will not abide by the or obliged by the directions or the whatever the international donors are saying, if they will not abide by that international donation will be stopped. They will not even have the resources to even operationalize their working day-to-day activities. So their priorities will shift from solving or resolving the local issues or the local challenges to the international priorities. Whatever they'll say, they have to abide by it. And secondly, they voluntarily also do whatever they say, because they know that if they will be abiding their directions, so they'll get more funding. Like selfish aspects, this can happen. Second thing in this part is it undermines the community participation. Earlier, or when the international donations are not there, means the NGO is working for the local issues. And when any institution or the organization works for the local challenges, that whole community participate in solving that challenges, because now they know that this is our organization and this organization is working for my betterment. But then the international donations or the shifting in the priorities of that NGO, then local community or the community at the local level, they also lose the interest, because now they know that this NGO is not working for us. This NGO is working for fulfilling their agendas or the international agendas. So this is also the one of the aspect. Next comes the national interest versus the NGO interest. What is this? As we have seen that in like many cases, some foreign funds or some foreign donors, they funds the NGOs to make the activities or to carry on the activities which is against that nation or against that government. So this is also the case, because as we can see in the case of Narmada Bachao Andolan, even the tribal people wanted the economic development over there, but the NGOs were protesting for the environmental sustainability. So this hampers the national interest of economic development, and in the garb of environmental sustainability, they were doing the protests and they were hampering the economic development. So this was the NGO's interest and the nation's interest or the national interest clash. Then next comes the money laundering. This is from the governmental point of view, how these international donations changes or impacts. Now the government will also see these NGOs as they are doing something illicit like money laundering, as we have already discussed, or they can carry out some activities which are against the national interest. So they put more and more stringent regulations, and directly then they can hamper the working of the NGOs. Then next is, government has also the fear that these NGOs with the foreign funding can mobilize the people against the nation's interest. So again, they put some stringent regulations in the working of the NGOs, and this directly impacts the working of NGO. Next comes the power imbalance. What is this? Now, very few NGOs are getting international donations. Now they are expanding their activities. Now they are more credible because people know, people have listened to their names. They have credibility and visibility. This creates a new cycle. If they are visible or credible, more and more sponsors comes in to fund the activities of those NGOs. They can perform better. They can raise more funds. They will be more credible and more visible. So this cycle goes on. But what about the other small NGOs, those who are not getting the foreign funds? So there is a power imbalance in the developmental landscape. There is a power asymmetry or the operations asymmetry in this whole development process. So it is a negative impact only, that there is an imbalance in the developmental landscape or the developmental process of the society. So these are some negative impacts. Next comes, as we have already discussed, that we can write it on the positive note, or we can write some, because the word is examined, we can write both the aspects. We have to investigate that to what extent this is true. So to what extent this is true, we have discussed here. We can write something that although there are some drawbacks or the negatives, fallouts, but still the foreign funding is required. What are the positives? Because the NGOs have to mobilize the financial resources to scale up their operations or for the day-to-day working. This foreign funding is required. With international donations or the international donors, not only the foreign funds in the financial aspects only comes, but it comes with the specializations also. Best practices also these NGOs can take advantage of. They can raise their concerns at the international forums. They can build the networks and connectivity at international forums. So these are some positive aspects. Next is exposure to international networks, then capacity building and the technical support. They can take the advantage of the best practices, technological advancements, what are going on in the other countries. They can explore that. Next comes the increased visibility and credibility. We have already discussed here that this cycle is created. So these are some positive aspects with respect to NGOs and foreign funding. Last comes as a conclusion or some way forward, that over-dependence of the international donors on the domestic NGOs is harmful as well, because they cannot sustain their operations for a while. Like we have discussed in the drawback, that what if they stop giving the international fundings? Their very existence is in danger then. So we have to strengthen the internal capacity of those NGOs. They can mobilize the resource from the government. They can do the work in collaboration and cooperative manner with other NGOs. They can mobilize the resources from the private entities. So they have to work hand in hand with these other stakeholders. Diverse the funding sources like this only, and they have to build the strong relationship with the government and donors, other donors like these only. And they should work within the regulatory framework so that they do not come under the surveillance of the government. Or also they lose the trust of the people if they do all these illicit activities. So this was the whole answer. Let's see the model answer. Model answer starting with the positives of the international funding just in the diagrammatically form, because the question is not explicitly asking about the positives. So you can take advantage of this and you can write something like this in the starting itself, so that your flow will be proper and not even wasting the time and the space for this. So you can take advantage of the flow diagrams or the flow charts or the diagrams or these special. You can take advantage of these flow charts or the diagrams. Let's see what this model answer is all about. Now the introduction starts with some data. Now the negative impacts, loss of autonomy, shift in priorities. Examples: Narmada Bachao Andolan, power imbalance created by unequal access to the funding, and some way forward. So this we have already discussed. And lastly, NGOs plays a crucial role in social and environmental issues. They must be carefully manage their relationship with the donors to maintain their autonomy and ensure that their activities remain focused for the needs of the local community. So this completes our second answer also. Let's start the third question. Highlight the impact of climate change on extreme weather events. Also, write the measures that need to be taken in order to enhance our preparedness to deal with these events. So, the question is asking about the climate change impact on extreme weather events, and the second is measures to enhance the preparedness. So, these are the two body parts. In intro, we can simply define with the definition of extreme weather events, or we can quote some recent data like extreme weather events are abnormal in terms of time, location, intensity and frequency. So this is the basic definition of extreme weather events, and you can put some data. Like, according to Center for Science and Environment, this is an NGO, Delhi-based NGO. It has tracked that in 2022, extreme weather events happened or occurred at least on 314 days out of 365 days. So this is the data you can quote in introduction itself. So let's come to the body part. It is asking about the impact of climate change on extreme weather events. So we have to tell that what climate change does and how it is impacting the extreme weather events. So for that, you have to know about what are the extreme weather events. In the introduction itself, you can write something about the extreme weather events as an example, like the severe heat waves, cold waves, intensified storms, or the cyclones, floods, droughts. These are some extreme weather events. So in the body, we have to connect this, that how this climate change is impacting these extreme weather events. So we'll see one by one. So the first one is temperature. Climate change increases the temperature of the atmosphere of the water bodies. So what this increased temperature will do? This will increase the frequency, intensity of these extreme weather events. Second comes as the climate change disrupts the weather pattern, the precipitation pattern. Due to increase in temperature, evaporation is increased. And when these precipitation patterns or these increased evaporation, may be more rainfall or maybe drought-like situation, because this will hampers this weather patterns and results into the droughts-like situation. Next comes, due to climate change, intensified heat waves can be there. For this purpose, wild fires can take place. Next comes the warmer ocean temperature. Due to this, cyclones can be intensified. Now they get more water with the more intensity. Now the cyclones are very frequent. You can give example in the cases of Arabian Sea. Now the Arabian Sea is experiencing more and more cyclones. Next comes, due to climate change, sea level rise is going on and intense rainfall due to increased or disrupted weather pattern. So this will also results into the rainfall, torrential rainfall. So this is the first part, that how it is impacting due to climate change. So this completes the body part of the first part. Now comes to the second part, measures to enhance our preparedness. The very first is, we have to take the efforts for the emission reduction, because we all know that this climate change is a human induced climate change. So we have to do the practices which is sustainable for the environment, which should not go against this our national action plan which we are taking to reduce the carbon emissions. So our approaches should be sustainable in nature, so as to reduce the carbon emissions. Then only we will be like, because we have the target to stay at less than 2 degrees temperature rise from the pre-industrial level. So we have to anyhow stay within these limits to not impact much that climate, so that it will not impact much on extreme weather events. So we have to take efforts for the emission reductions. Next comes the robust early warning system. For the timely and accurate information what's going on in what part, so that we can take the measures accordingly. Next comes is the disaster resilient infrastructure. The infrastructure should be made that the infrastructure should be made resilient to the disaster, so that it can withstand the extremities. We have to build the infrastructure so that it can withstand the extremities of the climate change or the extreme weather events, so that the losses of the property, livelihood of that region, of that community is minimized. Next comes the public awareness and education. Public awareness and education should be boosted, so that the local community should be aware of what the circumstances are, of how to take the disaster risk management, how to manage our ourselves and the situations when in the case of the disaster is going on, and after the disaster also, and before disaster also. So if the local community is aware of the hazard management, so they can take part in the community based disaster risk reduction. So the public awareness and the education goes hand in hand with the disaster risk reduction. Next comes is the climate resilient agriculture. Climate resilient agriculture is the foundation of sustainable food or the food security, and it will also act as insurance against extreme weather events. So we have to do the best practices which are sustainable in nature, which do not harm our environment. Next comes the capacity building and the training of the responders. So these are all the measures to enhance our preparedness. What we can write in conclusion, we can write some good practices, what's going on, like any case study, so that it shows the preparedness, or you can write some case study with respect to any of the situation, what's going on with respect to the climate change and extreme weather events. So with this you can conclude, or you can write some findings or like some studies that like in the case of this thing only, that we have to stay within the limits of 2 degrees Celsius temperature rise, so as to not see the very negative impacts of the climate change. Okay, so this way this third question is also over. Now let's see the model answer. Model answer, in the starting itself the definition is provided, and with respect to the examples also, like floods, cold wave, heat waves, these are the examples of extreme weather events. Then the impact of the climate change on extreme weather events. First, forest fire, simultaneous occurrence of the floods and droughts. Yes, there are some districts in India which are facing floods and droughts simultaneously due to disrupted weather patterns or the precipitation patterns. Then the Arabian Sea is witnessing more cyclone due to increased ocean or the sea surface temperature. Next comes other points like the swapping of the nature of extreme events. At the place where earlier droughts were happening, now the floods are happening there. So this is the swapping. Next come the less stable polar vortex, that the Arctic polar vortex is disrupted and it comes near the United States and causing the extreme or the torrential rainfall there. Then the measure to enhance the preparedness, like efforts for the emission reduction, we have to abide by the NEPCC, and we as globally also we are transitioning from the fossil fuel economy to the renewable sources based economy, so we have to transition that also. So we have to accelerate that transition. Next comes is the climate risk atlas. We have to map the critical vulnerabilities like with respect to the coasts, urban heat island, so that we can know that what are the vulnerable situations there, vulnerable people there, vulnerable society or the community, and we can take proper measures for that. Next is robust early warning system. These things we have already discussed. Next comes the conclusion that we have to seek the international collaboration in align with the INDCs which we took in the Paris Agreement to approach the disaster risk reduction. So this way we have completed all the 3 questions. Thank you and have a nice day.